Okay, so get this. An influencer with a massive following suddenly realized she was being stalked for months. But the really creepy part? The guy wasn't just some random creep. He was a literal sheriff's deputy. Yeah, the one whose job it is to enforce the law. Now she's taking the whole county to court over it. And the details coming out in this lawsuit are absolutely bonkers. Stick around because we're diving into the absolute worst of it. So the woman at the center of all this is Briana Ortega, a 29-year-old mom of two. She's decided to file a huge lawsuit against Riverside County, California, because she says they completely violated her rights. She claims the whole nightmare started with a totally innocent interaction at a family festival in the Coachella area. One of the county deputies was there, and he apparently gave her young son some stickers. Super nice, right? Well, according to the lawsuit, that brief passing moment quickly spiraled into genuinely scary stalking behavior. This is the same messed up behavior that ultimately cost that deputy his job and led to him getting convicted of some crimes. When you hear about police officers, the very people who are supposed to protect us, doing stuff like this, it just completely guts any trust the community has in them. Think about it. Our entire justice system is built on the idea that we can call and rely on these people. When one of them goes rogue and abuses that power, it makes everyone instantly suspicious. It basically shreds the police's credibility in the community. All right, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this lawsuit. Briana Ortega is the only one suing, but she's not just going after the county, she's going after everyone involved. The list of people and entities being sued is pretty wild. You have the county itself, Eric Piscatella, the deputy at the heart of the scandal, another deputy named Martinez Moreno, and a couple of other unnamed people. This guy Piscatella worked for the department for about 5 years, doing things like court services and patrol. Here's the key point. He actually ended up pleading guilty to multiple charges of totally misusing his department computer access. The lawsuit says this whole thing is a civil rights action based on Piscatella's predatory conduct. The core claim is that while he was literally on the clock, he repeatedly used official law enforcement databases and resources to illegally dig up Briana's personal information. Why? To stalk her and try to start a romantic relationship. She claims it all began with that simple interaction at the festival. Even though they didn't exchange numbers, she says her name was all Piscatella needed. Months later, out of nowhere, he popped back up. She'd totally forgotten about the guy, but then around January 2024, he apparently searched for her using the computer right in his official patrol car. This is a massive no-no, right? Whether it's a hospital, a police station, or a school, you absolutely cannot use professional systems to look up someone for your own personal reasons. The only defense would be a legitimate law enforcement reason, but that clearly wasn't the case here. This is actually a felony in California, using police databases for personal interests. So here's where it gets even more complicated and honestly more disturbing. According to Briana's legal team, it wasn't just one bad apple. They claimed that other deputies, specifically the named one, Martinez Moreno, and those other two unnamed officers were actually present when Piscatella was illegally running these searches, and none of them stopped him or reported his illegal activity. The lawsuit essentially says these coworkers were encouraging him, knowing he was doing this for his own creepy personal gain, not for actual police work. The legal pros point out that cops have a duty to intervene, but apparently that whole no snitching mentality we hear about in movies was alive and well in the department, and officers are just loath to turn each other in. So thanks to those illegal searches, Piscatella got his hands on Briana's private information, her home address and cell phone number. Then comes the truly chilling part. Piscatella shows up at her residence fully armed in his patrol car and in his uniform without any legal reason to be there. He even started questioning her mom about where Briana was. Her mother was super alarmed but thankfully refused to tell him anything. The big issue here is that level of pressure. When an armed officer in a full uniform shows up, most people feel they have no choice but to comply. But a quick legal tip from the lawyer in the story, you actually don't have to answer their questions, only provide ID. The best thing to ask an officer is, am I free to go or am I being detained? If you're not detained, you can just end the interaction right there. So after failing to get answers from her mom, Piscatella starts texting Briana directly. Remember, she never gave him her number. She was totally confused and only responded to figure out who he was and where they'd met. She quickly ended that conversation. Then, here's a crucial detail. Later, her sister was the victim of a crime, and Briana actually reached out to Piscatella as an officer for professional law enforcement help. Instead of assisting, he immediately hijacked the conversation, started pursuing her romantically, and actually asked her out on a date. Predictably, she cut off the conversation and changed her phone number for unrelated reasons. That's when things really took a dark turn. According to the lawsuit, his interest escalated into a full-blown obsession. He started routinely doing illegal searches on her private info, even running her license plate while his official patrol unit was right near her house. And yes, she claims other deputies were present for all of these actions and did nothing. But the absolute most unbelievable part happened in July 2024. After another illegal search, Piscatella drives to her house, armed and in uniform, and enters her residence without permission. His excuse? He made up this ridiculous false claim that a black man with dreadlocks had just jumped her fence and was trying to break in. This happened just 3 minutes after she arrived home from out of town, which made her instantly realize she was being watched. Once inside, under this fake emergency, he immediately started making romantic advances, telling her she was beautiful and asking her for her new phone number. Scared and uncomfortable, she started recording the interaction on her phone. The lawyers say that digital evidence and that recording are key. His search history and location tracking completely back up everything she's saying, and it totally demolishes his "I'm fighting crime" fake story. He was just using his uniform, his gun, and his position to stalk her. So, a quick side note that came up. Some people might ask if it hurt Briana's credibility that she actually asked him for help with her sister's crime. The legal experts say no way. She was simply seeking help from a person of authority, which is what you're supposed to do. If anything, it highlights the problem. When someone in authority twists a professional duty into a personal romantic pursuit, it creates a massive conflict of interest.
Anyway, after that terrifying home encounter and under duress, she believed he was still investigating that fake crime. She reluctantly gave him her new phone number, but naturally, Piscatella immediately started texting her again, pushing his creepy agenda and even saying he was going to steal her from her boyfriend. That was the absolute last straw. She told him to stop and officially reported his illegal conduct. So she's suing for a massive list of violations, including several federal civil rights claims, computer fraud, and a claim that the county failed to properly train and supervise their staff. The most important legal phrase in the whole lawsuit is course and scope of his employment. Why is that a big deal? Because it means he did all of this while he was on the clock, wearing the uniform and using official gear. That distinction is critical because it ties the liability directly to his employer, the County of Riverside. They are now on the hook for any massive settlement or verdict. Her legal team argues that the sheriff's department essentially had a culture of letting this slide. They allege there were no real policies to monitor computer usage, and similar conduct had routinely been unpunished, making deputies believe they wouldn't face consequences. The argument is that the county was, or should have been, totally aware that their deputies were using work systems to prey on women, but they had inadequate policies, training, and supervision. She is also claiming her Fourth Amendment rights were violated. That's your right to be free from unreasonable searches, both by him accessing her private data and by illegally entering her home without a warrant. So the biggest challenge in this lawsuit is proving that the county should be held responsible for basically looking the other way. The lawyer explains she has to prove two major things. First, she needs to definitively show that the other deputies were actually standing by and watching him run these illegal searches. They've named one other person, but they need to identify those unnamed deputies to show multiple people were complicit. Second, she needs to prove that the county's policies and training were completely inadequate. This is more objective. Did they have a system to monitor deputies' computer searches? Did they enforce any rules? If the sheriff's department has a culture of allowing this behavior to slide because they don't have the proper training, policies, or supervision in place, that's exactly how the county of Riverside gets put on the hook for all the damages. Now, the county has filed its official legal response, and it's pages and pages of the typical legal move, denying everything. But they also included a big list of what they call affirmative defenses. These are basically their legal excuses for why they shouldn't be held responsible even if what she says is true. This list includes complicated sounding things, but the most frustrating part is the claim of immunity. When a police department or government entity claims immunity, they're essentially arguing they have a legal shield or a free pass to do what they did, and they can't be held financially responsible. This is exactly why so many people feel like there's a double standard, where law enforcement can get away with things the average citizen never could. Now let's talk about the criminal case against Piscatella. He did ultimately plead guilty to misconduct. After Briana made her complaint, an internal investigation led to his resignation, and he was actually charged with 7 felonies for illegally accessing the department's computers. But here's the most unbelievable part of the entire story. He took a plea deal and asked the judge to downgrade his charges to misdemeanors. The judge reportedly said, and I'm quoting here, that nothing actually happened, as in he never fully broke into the house or physically hurt her. The legal experts were completely shocked that the judge minimized the severity of this. This wasn't a random guy. This was an armed cop using his uniform and a totally fake story about a crime just to get into a woman's personal life. They pointed out that they've seen people sentenced far more harshly for much less. In the end, the judge accepted the misdemeanor plea, giving Piscatella what amounts to a huge slap on the wrist, just 1 year of probation and 100 hours of community service. Why did the prosecution not bring more serious charges like stalking? Because Briana Ortega refused to testify. She told the LA Times that she was absolutely terrified of retaliation from him or the department. Because she wouldn't participate in the trial, the district attorney's office decided to drop the ball on those other charges. The frustrating takeaway for everyone is that this light sentence, just probation and community service, sends a terrible message. It tells officers that if you abuse your position and betray public trust, it's just a speed bump, not a career ender. Right now, his police certification is suspended, but the lawyer even said that once his probation is finished, there's a real path for him to potentially petition to get his badge and his job back. That's insane. So while the criminal side is basically wrapped up, the civil lawsuit is still moving forward. That's the case that's going to determine if the county is held responsible for the culture that allowed this to happen. We'll definitely be watching this one closely. Kind of unbelievable to say the least, but glad we were able to shed a light on it. We'll keep a careful eye on how this lawsuit progresses. Thank you so much, take care, and that's all we have for you right now here on Laws and Criminals. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and as always, please subscribe onto our channel.